Hi there fabric jugglers, it's Babs here from MyFieryPhoenix, and today I'm going to take you through a tutorial for how to use a bias binding foot. Now this is the second version of this particular tutorial. It's been incredibly requested because last time I managed to get my hands in shot and there were problems with the camera and it just wasn't very clear for people. So I'm re-recording it and I'm showing you how to create ties. I'm showing you how to create curves and how to feed the fabric through. I'll also take you through how to actually set up the foot itself so that you get the best out of this little piece of plastic and metal. So hopefully you'll stick around and I'll show you how to use the bias binding foot. So this foot has three parts to it. You've got the basic foot, which is a clip-on attachment. You have this adjustable screw, which will allow you to set the position of the needle so that you get the stitch as close or as far from the edge of the binding, the bias binding, as you need. And then you also have this gauge here, as this is an adjustable bias binding foot. So I tend to ignore the markings, 5, 10, 15 and 20 millimetres. Whilst they're accurate, I tend to adjust it according to the size of the binding that I have to hand. Now I've used some homemade binding, and if you are curious how to make your own binding, then there is a little eye up in the top corner up here somewhere, and that will give you a link through to my bias binding tutorial. That's 5 metres of bias binding from 1 fat quarter, 2 seams and only 2 cuts, so it's very, very simple to create. Just meters and meters and meters of binding, and that means that you can colour coordinate to your project. So I've used a dark binding in this tutorial to hopefully allow you to see it feeding through the foot nice and clearly. That's the main reason that I've used the darker binding, and also so that it's nice and obvious against the white fabric that I've used. Obviously you would use binding that colour coordinates or accents your projects depending upon your particular need. Now the simple way to use this foot is that you adjust the screws forwards. If you roll the this wheel so that it goes to the back, it brings the foot wider, this gap here wider, and if you roll it to the front, it makes that gap narrower. That's not very obvious on this example, but when you're using the foot itself, you will see that in action. And this screw at the back, if you open and move it, it allows you to adjust the position of this fine edge against the position of the needle. And you can use zigzag and decorative stitches because this foot is nice and wide. I will grab some of my binding and show you how to insert it into the foot before we move on to anything else. So here we have the foot in question, the bias binding foot, and hopefully, as you can see, we have 2 feeds here, and we will be putting 2 sides of the bias binding through these feeds. Now one of the things that I'm going to suggest to you is that you double check that these feeds are clear. For me, there was some plastic excess which was covering the edge of this lower portion of the feed on the foot, and I had to actually clear that away with an X-Acto knife, with a sharp knife. So if you are having difficulties threading the bias binding through this plastic feed portion, then please double check to see that the plastic feed is as you would expect it and that there is clear passage all the way through. Once I removed the excess plastic, suddenly it became a dream to use. So we've got our bias binding, which you've already seen earlier in the video, and we're going to just slide it in. Now hopefully the dark colour of the binding will help you to see this clearly. So we slide it in between the 2 slots, and each of these feed pieces starts off quite wide and then gets narrower the closer you get to the actual presser foot itself. And then you just continue feeding them through, and then you can pull them through either with your thumb or you can use a stiletto or a pin. Now that I have removed the excess plastic, I don't need to use a stiletto or a pin. And the final thing that you need to check is that the width is set correctly. Now I find it easier to check that with the foot off of the sewing machine and also upside down. If I have it the right side up, I tend to get a little bit distracted by the measurement figures, which are fine for giving you a rough idea of how wide to open the guide in the first place. But when I'm finishing off and finalising, I just want to make sure that it's running right snug against the edge of the binding without crushing it. I don't want to squish it up too much, but I do need it to be nestling so that it's got guidance. And then that should just slide through under the foot. So now that I've shown you how that is inserted before it goes onto the sewing machine, I'll pop the foot on the sewing machine and show you how easy or tricky it can be, depending on how my luck is going today, to actually insert it in the machine itself. We have a simple bar attachment, so we just drop the presser foot down and into place, and there is gap between the foot and the plastic guide, so we can thread our thread through, and that isn't going to cause us any issues. And then what we need to do is, with our bias binding, fold it so the final edge is towards the throat of the machine and the two folded edges are towards the outside of the sewing machine, because they're going to be threaded through here. Now, all being well, this will be fairly straightforward. If not, there are some other tricks we can use, and there it is, threaded through. It can be that simple, and it doesn't have to be more complicated. The first thing we need to do is make sure that the needle lines up with the edge of the binding. And now that we've got it inserted, what we're going to do is use this this control knob or screw to position the binding in relation to the needle. So you loosen it up, and then you can move it quite significantly left and right. And what you need to do is just get it so that it is where you want those stitches to be, how close to the edge you want those stitches. And and the tricky part is, when you actually tighten this knob up, or tighten this screw up, you'll find that the plastic moves. So this is the hardest part, ironically, is setting that width, because it continues to move. I'm trying to do this without blocking the view for you, which isn't necessarily very easy. So you hold it steady and then tighten the screw, but you need to make sure that you're not twisting it away, otherwise that screw just won't hold the position that you're after. So, and always make sure that you test it, which might seem a bit heavy-handed, but make sure that you try and move that afterwards, because, as I say, that screw can be a bit tricky sometimes. So once it's all aligned and you've used the screw head to get the position that you're looking for, drop it down manually just to double check everything's okay, and then we can start to sew on through. I tend to hold the binding up so that we can see that it is following this line in to the foot. And once we've started sewing, you can double check that the stitches are as you want them, and that's how you make a tag. Now, if you are then looking to put your binding around some fabric, what we need to do is then feed the fabric into the machine. So that's what this central slot is for here. So once you've got your binding in place, you can then insert the fabric. With a curve, I tend to just position the fabric with the binding in place before I get to the foot. So we'll just pop a couple of pins in to hold that in place, and then we'll gently feed it as the time comes when we get nearer the foot. Not necessarily so important to do that if you are working on a straight edge, but where we're curving, both an outer curve and then a gentle inner curve, I find it best to just pin that in place before we start, so that we're not worrying too much about that at the end. And then one final pin down here, and we're good to go. So if you have difficulty inserting the fabric, and sometimes you could just use some spray starch to insert the fabric, but if the fabric is very light, then just don't insert it. Simply start and then feed it in as the rest of the fabric comes through. Make sure you put the presser foot down. And as you come here, this should be feeding through the centre portion. You can remove the pin, use it to hold that before you get to the foot. Obviously it cannot feed through the foot in any way. Remember, we must remove those pins or else they'll not feed through. And as you can see, this is now starting to adhere quite nicely to the fabric, and it's neat on both the front and the reverse. And then we just follow on round the curve. Again, remember to hold it. I find it much easier to feed everything through if I hold it up at a slight angle. And then when you finish, a slight reverse stitch just to hold everything in place. Make sure the needle is raised. Nip away the bias binding at the front, and then you'll need to pull it out the back, and then you can trim away the edges. So now this has been removed from the sewing machine. Here you can see we have the construction for a tie, nice simple tie, and then you have the curve, and we have a nice wide outer curve and an inner curve before moving on to a straight line. So that is how simple it is to use the binding foot, and it looks just as neat on the reverse as it does on the front. So hopefully that has helped. If you need some information on how to do a corner, a mitered corner rather than a curve using bias binding, I've got a video coming up for that, so keep your eyes out for that one. If that's something that would be of interest to you, then please subscribe to the channel, and that way it'll just drop into your feed once that video's been released. But here we have a nice simple curve which has been created using our bias binding foot. Hopefully I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.